Hello, Reach Your Happy community. Welcome back to another episode of Reach Your Happy with Laura. I am Laura, and today's topic again is around relationships. And I'm sharing with you today my number one tip for being in a relationship. And it is the hardest thing, but it is the most important thing that I have found, and that is being able to admit when you were wrong. Now, this comes, obviously, there's so many shades of this, but the willingness to take accountability for your part in an argument, an exchange, to admit that you did have a tone in your voice, that was maybe demeaning, or that you reacted out of frustration. Whatever your reasoning is, being able to say that I reacted in a way that I wish I hadn't, that I would like to retract if I could, but I know I can't. So instead, I'm going to take full ownership of it. Now, when doing this, it is very human to want the person you're interacting with to respond in a similar manner, owning their part in it, taking accountability. And we can't ask for that. We can't demand that. We can't even expect that of people. But if you're listening to this, then that tells me that you are a more conscious being, that you're trying to develop more self-awareness and work on yourself to help improve both your relationships and all areas of your life. So though it is challenging to own your part in it, without any blame in your voice, any kind of pointing towards them doing the same thing, and just owning, you know what? I apologize for responding in that way. I'm really trying to get better at that. And next time, if I feel overwhelmed or frustrated, I am going to do a better job at balancing myself and taking a step back. And that could be the end of the conversation. Maybe you don't want it to be. Maybe you want your partner or your friend or your sister or your husband to say, you know what? You're right. I need to take ownership of my part in this, and I'm sorry for calling you that name. But again, we can, but it's not helpful to act out of expectation. I'll do this in the hopes of receiving that back, because how someone else's life is orchestrated isn't up to you. Sure, we want people to treat us a certain way, but we know, living on this planet long enough, that people don't respond how we want them to respond. People respond as they feel called. So it's giving up the need to control someone else's response to you, and instead take the control where you can, which is in your response. Understanding that each soul has work to do in this human body, and that means there's challenges involved. And a large part of our challenges absolutely comes in form of relationship, because with relationship, there's a certain level of closeness and connection, which we allow people in, making ourselves a little bit more vulnerable, which allows these deeper interactions to unfold and potential hurt to be caused. And the same goes for that other person in the relationship. So I wouldn't say avoid relationship if you want to avoid suffering and pain. You're going to deal with that. If you're completely alone, you deal with that. You have no one to lay it on or point it towards. It's just about you. So in taking responsibility for your part in an argument or in whatever the situation is, and really looking at it outside of the conversation, really looking at, what did I do here? What could I have done differently? This is how you're going to shift. This is how you're going to evolve in a relationship. and mostly with your relationship to yourself. Without a doubt, you are wrong. You're wrong sometimes. Other times you are right based on your perspective. And what I've discovered between Brad and I, he is right quite a bit. And at first I felt frustrated by it. I placed a lot of judgment on myself of like, why is this so hard for me to admit that he's right? And as we continued to have exchanges and I would acknowledge my part in it and he would acknowledge his, and he would say, oh yeah, and I was wrong for, and I feel more open to say, yeah, and I was wrong for. It shifted our relationship so much. When something goes on, there are still those heated moments, and then we have some space and we can both revisit it. And the first word out of our mouths is like, yeah, you know what? I'm sorry about that. Recognizing that we're human, that we make mistakes, that we react strongly to things. Maybe we're triggered, who knows? Stressed out, tired, hungry, overwhelmed, overworked, whatever it may be. And arguments happen. And I'm not encouraging you to try to get rid of arguments, but rather learn to argue better. Learn to resolve that argument. I think relationships should really be called negotiationships, because it's so much of that. Always trying to find the sweet spot for these two humans, or many groups of humans, whatever the relationship dynamic is, to somehow work in harmony. But harmony doesn't need to mean, I mean, Brad and I have such different viewpoints of the world and of humans. Like we practically are back to back facing opposite directions. And at first he would try to convince me of his way and I would try to convince him of my way. And over time, because every time we started to talk about bigger life stuff, about the state of the world, whatever it was, we would start to get a little bit pushy. It's like, no, I'm right. No, I'm right. And we wouldn't necessarily say I'm right. It's like, no, but look at this. And he'd be like, no, but look at this. And both of us had a little bit of defensiveness going on. And one time we talked about it, many times it wasn't one time. Many times we talked about it and discovered that we are justified in our opinions of things, and there's no need to try to convince the other side to come over. Like, how much of life are we trying to convince other people that my way is the way? Many religions do that. Wars do that. No, this is the way. No, this is the God. No, this is the workout stuff, nutrition things. It's like, no, don't ever eat a carbohydrate again. No, always eat carbohydrates. Never eat meat again. No, never eat animal. It's like, it's all or nothing. And so it's, with that kind of way of being, there's so much rigidity there, and really developing this awareness that to each their own, because from each person's personal perspective, based on the time and day they were born, into the family and the dynamics, you know, even if you have siblings, you have different parents, because the oldest sibling, right, that was their first kid. And then when you're second in line, third in line, fourth, fifth, sixth, you get a different kind of parent raising you. Maybe you revisit a certain Christmas with a sister and you're talking about it and you're like, no, I remember it, and they remember it a different way. Well, from each person's unique perspective, we are right. It's like we all live in our own separate universes. So sometimes when Brad and I are having a thing, it's like, you know, because I'm living in this universe and you're living in that universe. So where's the common ground there? Sometimes there isn't. And that's where we are constantly agreeing to disagree. And we kind of even joke about it like, yeah, okay, you keep thinking that, you know, because we feel so sure in our way, in our opinion. However, no amount of me pushing up against him, trying to convince him when he's dead set in his way is going to do anything but cause frustration. So we would argue about whatever it was, whatever topic it was, and then come back later and be like, yeah, you know what? I do see what you're saying. I just don't feel that way. And be like, thank you. And you know what? I do understand that. And I want to try to be more compassionate. And I also feel like, and so it's kind of this blending of ideas and taking on what really does resonate with you and letting relationships expand your way of thinking, but not blindly following any which way. Even in session with me, I tell people, if something doesn't resonate with you about what I'm saying, don't take it home with you. Likewise, if it does, work on absorbing it and applying it to your life and seeing in how many ways can it grow and help you expand past the point that you've been before. And isn't that what relationships are for? To help us expand. Sometimes to root more deeply into our beliefs, other times to open our eyes to new horizons. So again, that number one tip with relationships, don't be afraid to say you're wrong. There's going to be so much resistance to it. Like it happened the other day. I can't even remember the topic because it just doesn't matter. But, you know, I said to Brad, I was like, fuck, you're right again. I was like, how does it feel? And he's like, you know what? It's not easy. Like, I don't want to be right like this, but I am. I'm like, nah, you were. You know, sometimes it's about an unfortunate thing that I'm like really hopeful about, hopelessly optimistic. And I am proven wrong. And he's sitting there like, he doesn't want to say I'm right. He never says that. But since we got into this pattern of taking ownership for our stuff, we also are able to admit when we were wrong and that the other person was right. And it has created this dynamic in our relationship where there's a lot less fear, a lot less tension if something doesn't go the way we expect it to, or I'm like, no, I'm really sure about this. And then it doesn't go according to plan. I don't feel shame. I bring it back to him and I'm like, oh, you were right. Like, what wasn't I seeing here? And the same goes for him. But often it takes some time for each of us to kind of digest what the other person's input was, and always reflecting on how can I grow from this? Every wall, everything you come up against that's challenging for you, asking yourself, how can I grow from this? What can I take away from this? And in admitting you were wrong, or that you overreacted, or that you're sorry about your actions in some way, it allows a certain level of closeness between you and that other person. I think that's really what I feel with my clients, because I don't have, obviously it's a little bit different because it's not my husband or my sibling or my best friend necessarily, but it's this willingness to see someone else's perspective. And I've learned so much from each of you. That, again, we really do see the world through our own eyes, and it is up to each individual to take accountability for the areas in our lives where we could absolutely adjust. And most of this are just thought patterns, and not being upset with yourself for having a thought pattern. Like being sick of this person always being right, or wanting to be right, even though you know you're not. And releasing any shame or judgment about it. I tell my nieces and nephews all the time, if they're, I say something about mom and dad, or they're complaining about, and I oh, they weren't listening or whatever it is, I remind them that your parents are growing up too. I'm still growing up. My dad, grandpa, he's still growing up. And they're like, you never stop learning from life. You never stop growing from people and relationships. I tell the kids, mom has never had a 2-year-old before. This is her first 2-year-old. Dad has never dealt with this. I think about my dad. He's never had a 33-year-old Laura. Now he does. But it's this constant adjustment, and you start to really gain this deep level of compassion for other people. And why? Why do we gain compassion for other people when we start admitting that we're wrong about something? It's because we're giving compassion to ourselves. We're giving us a door to say, you know what? Yeah, I can be wrong. I'm not always right. Sometimes I overreact. I'm emotional. I'm sad. I feel forgotten about, right? There's a deeper thing going on here, and I'm reacting from that place. So you have compassion for yourself, and that's when you can take accountability and own your part in it and let all the shame dissolve and just show up as your human self. And if someone else, your partner, says, I told you, you know what? That's their stuff. It can even feel hurtful because you're being vulnerable in saying that you were wrong. But just send that energy right back to that person, because that's not yours, that's theirs. They have a lot of unprocessed shame. They were probably shamed by their father or their mother or their aunt about being wrong. So, yeah, relationships are a tough one, guys, but so important. And I'm always going to keep bringing it back to the point of your relationship with yourself is the most important. That is the seed from which everything else gets to grow. The more compassionate you are with you, the more forgiving, the more introspective and loving, kind, and willing to take accountability for your actions, even taking accountability for the thought patterns that you rode the wave of and got to this place of heaviness or negativity, whatever it may be. Like when you're owning that in you, every relationship you have changes. Not because you've convinced other people to do it your way, but because you're showing up in relationships differently, so your perspective of all relationships shifts. When someone's mean to you or someone can't take accountability, you just get to look back at yourself and go, I remember when I couldn't either. And it's hard. It's actually really hard to be in that position. This position of being so afraid of being wrong or admitting some disservice or whatever it may be. It's really hard to be there. And so you're just giving people back their stuff and being really compassionate and loving. Because humans make mistakes every single day, and that's just the way it is. And if we start to take the opportunity to learn from our mistakes, what a world it could be. But it really starts with you. It starts with your own inner world, your own home, right here, right behind those eyes. It starts with you. So if I can be of any assistance to you, please let me know, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you for showing up. If you enjoyed this message, please like and subscribe. It helps me very much. And I am sure I'll have another message for you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.